Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Larry Talks. I'm your host, Dr. Larry Doyle. If you want, grab yourself a glass of tea or something else to drink and get comfortable, and let's get into today's session. Today, I want to take this one a step further than the last session of Law Without Values, because if we're going to talk about how far we've drifted, we have to understand where we started. The founders did not create a system of law in a vacuum. They didn't sit down and invent something entirely new. They built our system on something much older, something that had already stood the test of time, common law. And common law wasn't just a set of rules, it was a way of thinking about justice. It was grounded in the idea that law grows out of the experience of the human interaction of what society recognizes as fair and just over time. But more importantly, common law was never separated from morality. Right and wrong mattered. Judges didn't ask, what does the rules say? They asked, what is the just outcome? And that's a critical difference because the founders understood something that we seem to be forgetting today. Law is not supposed to control society. It is supposed to reflect the values of a just society. Let me say that again. Law is not supposed to control society. It is supposed to reflect the values of a just society. That's why they spoke in terms of justice, liberty, rights, and yes, morality. They assumed that the people interpreting the law would bring with them a sense of right and wrong. Not perfect people, but people grounded in values. Now compare that to what we talked about earlier, a system where law is no longer about what is right, but about what can be predicted. A system where outcomes matter more than justice. A system where the question becomes, what can we do instead of what should we do? That is the direct contradiction. Common law says, do what is right, guided by principle. Law without values says, do what works, guided by outcome. And those two ideas cannot coexist. One produces justice, the other produces compliance, and compliance is not the same thing as justice. Now, here's where ethics comes into this. Because at the end of the day, law is not just about institutions, it's about people, and people make choices. Ethics is simple when you strip everything else away. It's doing the right thing even when no one is looking, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs you something, even when the system would allow you to do otherwise. That's what the law was supposed to be built on, not just enforcement, but integrity, not just authority, but responsibility. Because if the people inside the system are not guided by values, then no amount of rules will fix it. You can write all the policies you want, you can create all the procedures you want. But if the people applying them are asking, what can I get away with, instead of what is right, then the system will fail every time. That's why this matters. This isn't academic. This isn't theory. This is the difference between a system people trust and a system people fear and ignore. The founders understood that. Common law understood that. And deep down, we still understand that too. We know when something is wrong. Even if it follows the rules, we feel it, just like on that playground. And the question we have to start asking again is not, was a rule broken, but was justice done? Because if we lose that question, we lose the very purpose of the law. And once that happens, we're no longer a system of justice. We're a system of control. There is a fundamental misunderstanding that sometimes surfaces in public discourse. The idea that judges, particularly those on the highest court, are somehow expected to deliver outcomes that align with the preferences of those who supported their appointment. That expectation is not just misplaced, it strikes at the very heart of what an independent judiciary is meant to be. The judiciary was never designed to serve political interests. It was designed to stand apart from them. While every other branch of government operates within the currents of politics, the courts exist to interpret and defend the Constitution. Nothing more, nothing less. Their responsibility is not to any individual party or agenda, but to the enduring principles written into the nation's founding document. When judges are expected to produce desired outcomes rather than faithful interpretations, the role of the court shifts from guardian to instrument. And once that shift occurs, the balance of power begins to erode. The Constitution is no longer protected from political pressure, it becomes vulnerable to it. This is where the danger becomes most clear. Law, when separated from principle, becomes nothing more than a tool, something to be used, shaped, and directed by whoever holds power. That is what law without values looks like. Rules still exist, but they no longer serve justice. Decisions are still made, but they are no longer anchored in constitutional meaning. Authority is still exercised, but it is no longer restrained by principle. An independent judiciary is the barrier against that outcome. It ensures that law remains grounded in values, fairness, consistency, and fidelity to the Constitution rather than shifting political demands. It ensures that no matter who holds power, there remains a check rooted in principle rather than preference. The strength of a democracy is measured not by whether courts agree with those in power, but by their willingness to uphold the law even when it is inconvenient to do so. When the judiciary resists political pressure, it preserves the integrity of the law. When it yields, the law may still exist, but its values do not. That is not a flaw in the system, that is the system working exactly as it was intended. If the judiciary bends, law still exists, but its values disappear. If this subject resonated with you, please hit the follow button so you don't miss a single session. If you know someone who would benefit from this, please share it with them. Please stay safe, and we'll see you at the next session.